All right, my friends. It is that time again for another episode of Everything They Don't Want You to Know. I'm your host, Jesse Blaze Snider, and today we are going to be talking about, we're going to be talking about a lot of things. We're going to be talking about the fucking meaning of life. We're going to be talking about how anything and everything that can happen will happen inside of a mind. And that's all because of the law of infinite compensation. And, so many of these laws, if you understand, if you really think through where we began from, with law number one, the law of one, and the law number two, in this case, mentalism, the principle of mentalism. My 13 universal laws are a combination of the Hermetic principles, 7 or 8, I think it's 7 Hermetic principles, and the only difference, like 6 of the Hermetic principles are 6 of the universal laws that Kabbalah teaches, but beyond Kabbalah, the universal laws that Kabbalah teaches are repeated at least dozens of times that I've been able to verify from various cultures. They teach the exact same fucking thing. The universal law and Hermetic principles, because the Hermetic principles teach an additional principle, which is the principle of mentalism, that all is mind. And I believe that's a very important component to the universal law, to really understanding what we're dealing with here. Because we're living in a matrix, right? Quantum physics is proving that. But what does that mean? What does it really mean that you're living in a matrix? What is a matrix? What is this thing or whatever? You got to think about it the same way you think about this AI that's getting booted up, right? Right now, this AI doesn't have a physical form. It's mental, and it is thinking, right? You're imagining all the things that the AI is thinking. I was listening to a great conversation between two AIs talking about human philosophy. I've always considered myself a bit of a robot, and these motherfuckers sounded like me in how they were talking about largely, something like philosophy or whatever. There's a lot of circular arguments, and there's a lot of fucking superfluous arguments, just sort of conversations that are neither here nor there. They don't really matter. And I've never really gotten lost in philosophy. Everybody wants to take the side of this guy and that guy. The people who are most on the money are the people who are approaching this from a much more sort of religious and spiritual standpoint of our oneness, our connectivity, our reflection of one another. So when I've taught the universal laws classes in the past, I always go through all of the universal laws to start us off. And I haven't done that on other episodes of this show, but I'm going to do it today because compensation is part and parcel of some of the main fundamental laws of the universe, starting with the law of one, which states that everything is one thing. Okay? That's it. Everything's one thing. One consciousness that divided itself up into many different pieces so that it could observe and experience itself in a variety of forms that it had imagined, right? So as a consciousness, it thinks of all these things. If you think this AI computer can imagine all these possibilities, all of this math and blah, blah, blah. It's thinking. This physical place is the execution of that. But the execution of a physical thing from a mind is what? It's a mind. It's a fucking hologram. It's a hallucination of a mind. We are in a mind that has convinced itself of physicality, solidity, liquidity, all these things. This is ideas. Oxygen, all these different formations of different molecules and ways in which they interact. The rules of our reality could be very different. We could be breathing methane. We could be living in an endless ocean, and no planetary bodies. There's all different variety of existence that could sort of come forth from the ether. And this is just one choice. And, you can look at so many of the things. It's all built together very purposefully, and all, helps each other in harmonious ways. But so many different pieces of this system could be removed. So many different things could be added in. There's a lot of ways to intellectualize a reality, and in the far reaches of science fiction and other places, you can sometimes see these things being thought about. But very much so, these things are all arranged in a certain way, and it's arranged by this mind, okay? So everything is a mental projection. Sometimes, people sort of will ask of like, how is this mental projection, how has this been created so perfectly when, our minds, if we're all sort of like gods walking around and we're projecting this thing, how come we're not like tearing it apart or whatever? And, there is no time on the other side of things. There's maybe something that you could call like a stacking of information, based on sort of the universal laws that we see here, as the mind developed whatever natural way in which it learned. Each thought was sort of built upon the next one and the next one and the next one. But they were all sort of just perfect mathematical thoughts. And then eventually the consciousness becomes conscious of itself and starts to make different choices. But even those, could be sort of considered mechanical. There's only a choice or two it can make. Perhaps it's inevitable, whatever choices it's going to make. And the universe is stacked on top of itself in different layers of dimensions. And each dimension seems to sort of bring us to a new perspective that takes us out of aspects of an old perspective that we can no longer see or perceive anymore, and brings us to a new place where we can perceive new things. The fall of the angels in the Bible, the fallen angels, it was a fall of vibration, falling from one dimension, which is attached to this one. So it's like you could fall, like I could be standing outside on my patio right now, and I could fall in vibration down to a lower dimension, and there would be no fall. I wouldn't be falling. You wouldn't see it, but vibrationally, my vibration, my vibration would be lowering to and we get into the law of vibration in a second. Everything vibrates. Everything has a unique vibration. Okay. Everything's one. Everything is mind. Everything has a unique vibration. Now, this universe, the universe in general, physicality in particular, creates a disconnect from God or the infinity, and a imbalanced vibration. Essentially, any direction you go in, I'm a this, that, or the other thing, you are fundamentally choosing some sort of form, and you are no longer the balance of the nothing. However, because of the nature of this universe, which you can sort of think about as like scales, the scales of justice, there is always a balance, a polarity to whatever energy you hold. So if you hold one thing, somebody else on planet Earth or something else is holding another thing. There's always counterbalance to everything going on. Okay? And this natural polarity of things is created by the nothing that everything comes from, that the creativity, the consciousness came from, and that thinking mind, which is active and doing things. So there's something that's inactive and there's something that's active. We talked about this before with breathing. You breathe, active, you're inactive. In between everything is empty space. The empty space is inactive. Every night you go to sleep, you rest. You wake up the next day, you're active. So this back and forth, this push and pull is very fundamental. And polarity of people, the way people polarize when they come in, is based on your, people will say your horoscope or whatever, but based on astrology, based on the day time that you come in and what the moon and the sun and the stars and the planets are up to. If they are in one position or another, it will dictate a lot of things about essentially the way your water in your body is programmed when you come into this reality. You are programmed by, like imprinted essentially, like imagine a wave crashing as you're born, and like, that tide and the measurement of that tide and the math of that tide, it has real profound effects. And people love to discount horoscopes as pseudoscience because, it tends to be a little wibbly wobbly, like, I don't know, I guess that could apply or whatever else. But there's a saying, millionaires don't do their horoscopes. Billionaires do. And the thing that you can learn about with horoscopes is there are all these tides of the universe and of the stars and of the planets and of the moon, etc. And as they ebb and flow, depending on what your horoscope may be, when you were born and the time and whatnot, you will have downturns of energy, upturns of energy, moments in time where it's a good idea for you to plant seeds and start new projects, and moments in time where it's really not a very good idea to do that. And billionaires will pay attention to that. They'll schedule their vacation for the time when it says, I'm supposed to relax during this time. And they'll go away for 2 weeks during that time when it says, don't do any work. It's not going to be good. You can foresee these things if you get onto your schedule. You can foresee the tides of the universe and the energy that you're going to be personally dealing with as the world turns. So that is essentially the benefit of astrology and these things. So we've got the law of one. You're all one. The law of mind. Everything's a mind. The law of polarity. Everything's fundamentally polarized, and everything is vibrating uniquely from one another. Nothing is repeated. They do tests on twins all the time. The twins are always uniquely different in one way or another. The energy of the universe is never repeated precisely. And then you've got the law of relativity, right? So any position that you take, any vibration you take is fundamentally out of balance with the universe, because the universe at its heart is at rest. And the thinking mind is attached to that part that is asleep and is constantly rejuvenated by it. But in this physical reality, we are a little bit more disconnected, even though we rest at night and whatnot. And all of these physical vibrations that we take on, if we entertain counter energies, we can balance ourselves and bring ourselves back to or closer to the oneness, that balanced thing that is at rest. Because even though we've taken a configuration that is fundamentally away from the thing, we live in this polarized world where there is another energy that could potentially balance us out and zero out our energy, which would essentially bring us back to that null, one, nothing, original, infinite God of empty space that we exist in. So, there's infinite vibrations, but there's infinite relativities. And the law of gender states that essentially there's two energies that have been created by the universe, masculine and feminine. The masculine energy I like to boil down to, and there's a lot of ways to think about this stuff. So if you ever hear me say something, you're like, I don't think about it like that. It doesn't necessarily mean that your way is wrong or my way is wrong, because there's some subtlety about how to interpret this information. But when I say that, the information is very fundamental, but I mean interpret it in terms of putting words to it, in terms of me saying it out loud. There may be somebody else who says it a little different, and even uses different words and thinks about it, but they'll be still teaching you the same fundamental principle at all times, okay? So the fundamental principle here of gender is there's two genders, masculine and feminine, but it's not like a dick between your legs and a vagina. It's two energies. There are two energies, and you, anybody I'm talking to, you have both of them. You have masculine energy and you have feminine energy. And I like to think of masculine energy as the nothing that is keeping everything as it is, holding everything in place. Every time we rest, every piece, every meditation, everything stays the same while we take a rest, right? And that the feminine energy is that creative energy of creation that goes, oh, this is lovely, but maybe it would be even better if we made this adjustment, made this change. And as things change and progress, that's during the activity. And then we rest. Activity and rest. Masculine femininity. You've got times where you're resting. You've got times and things where you feel like, I'd like to keep this just the way it is. And then you've got times when you're like, I'd like to see change here. I'd like to be creative in this space. I'd like to see this transform in an even better way because I can see a positive future. Both things are very positive. You know, once we have something that we like, we need people to preserve it. When we find somebody that we like, the masculine energy of, oh, look, I love this person, and I'm going to give them a nice house to protect them, and I'm going to set them up so that they can just be their wonderful self because I love them, and I just want them to be safe. I love this just as it is. But then perhaps you're, generally speaking, more feminine female, even though Jesse, who you're talking to right now, I'm generally, now I would say I'm more balanced now, but I came into this world definitely more feminine. Always, like, my energy was way more feminine. And still to this day, I'm a creative person. I'm constantly just, maybe it could be a little better. Maybe it could be a little better. Generally speaking, going by my definition, I'm completely feminine and I'm not fucking masculine at all. Other than the fact that I see people, I have people that I love. Shout out to Julie Breitigam, people who I want to preserve and I want to give them the space so that they can be happy. My children, I'm very masculine when it comes to them, and I want them to be able to have things. And I have plenty of masculine tendencies beyond that. Again, this is, everybody's got both. Okay? So, you've got these two energies that you are some mix of. Maybe you're 90-10, maybe he's 80-20, or whatever it might be. And everybody's got a different vibration, but those two vibrations, they could be two relativities of these gender mixes, and those relativities will balance. A friendship will balance you. Your parents or your brother or your sister, the relationships can balance you. Romantic relationships can balance you because of this polarity of this mind and this nothing. And that we're all attached to it. Okay, so continuing up the chain, the next three laws that I like to talk about in order, and as I've laid out the episodes where we've talked about universal law so far, you've got 7, the perpetual exchange of energy, 8, the law of inspired action, and 9, the law of cause and effect. And now, there's a perpetual exchange of energy. So you got all of these uniquely gendered beings running around, finding relativities or not finding relativities and running into, non-complementary energetic patterns. And every single person they run into, whether it's complementary or not, if it's complementary, that'll be a perpetually exchange of energy, one way or another. Or not a good perpetual exchange of energy, say you guys aren't lining up right, but you are always exchanging energy with the universe. You walk outside into the backyard and just stand there for a second, and you're going to breathe and exchange prana and oxygen with the universe and the trees around you, and you're going to let out some carbon monoxide, and they're going to go, thanks for that. And you're going to step onto the grass probably, or even step onto a stone, and their consciousness is going to record you standing out there, even though you may not think of a rock or even the grass as consciousness, but yep, both of them are. Various levels, lower levels, but there is reaction, there is response. You will receive energy from Mother Earth as you connect to the grass and even some of the stones, depending on what kind of patio you have. Some patios and materials and whatnot will block some of that energy that you get from planet Earth. And if you have shoes on, depending on if you go out barefoot or if you have shoes, you might block some of this energy. But you'll do a certain amount of exchange of energy with the Earth, and that's just stepping outside the back door. And you are being recorded at all times by every inanimate thing around you. This is a hologram. Every single bit of the reality is made up of consciousness, and all of the consciousness, no matter what form it's taking, is essentially recording a memory into the Akashic records. Our memories, as I have come to understand, are stored non-locally, because it's not really our memories, it's the memory of the thing. Our memories, in particular, are related to our emotions. So we have an emotional memory about how we felt about the things that we experienced. But the actual facts of the matter are like soaked into every square inch of everywhere we go, because it's all this giant mind. So we are perpetually exchanging energy with the world around us. And the law of inspired action states that because this is an intelligent world and we're all one with it, there's essentially nothing that's keeping anything away from us. Now, the caveat to this is we are all on a journey that we have carefully laid out for ourselves with the infinite consciousness of God, or if you will, or whatever you want to call the infinite consciousness, looking over our shoulder and helping us to sculpt out the perfect way for us to learn all the things that we want to learn. Because trust me, this is all about learning. This is all about growing our perspective, raising it higher and higher, and really being able to look at ourselves, firstly, and everything. And to exert better control over it by aligning with it and recognizing the part that we play in the game, so that we can, be essentially so that we can be the people the infinity would like us to be, because the infinity knows better than we do. And it's not to say that there's no choice and there's no things that we get. Oh, there is. There's total things. And to some degree, though, the math has already chosen that. The math has chosen the things that you're going to probably like food-wise. But there's variation within these choices. And that's why there's a multiverse where all of the different choices are actually being chosen. Because this is a giant mind, and it can. So it is. And it's testing all these things. When we get into some of these crazy high concepts, there's a lot of murky. Well, let's just say we get to sort of the edge of the blade in terms of my understanding of everything. I question sometimes if there is a souled being going through every piece of the multiverse, or if the souled being is the one that matters, and the matrix of our reality is just sort of recording the other possibilities, just sort of for posterity, so that we know, as like if you had done this, like these are the things that could happen. Because I've been sort of pointed to a notion that as we grow our consciousness, what we actually do is we limit the amount of multiverse that there can be. Because as we close certain doors to how we behave, all of a sudden we kind of unify ourselves across the multiverse, and there isn't any more doors to open. We've become someone who always shows up the same way in every reality. And we are no longer creating these huge swells of infinite possibility, because we've basically brought ourselves into, consternation. Just sort of a a stranglehold on our reality and what we want our reality to be, and what we want our reality to be once we really truly connect to the infinity and start to understand the universal things. Well, of course, our thoughts on what we want our reality to be are pretty universal. So there's this shrinking of sort of possibility to a certain degree, even though the possibilities are so much more, but we get to be involved in those creations and where we go and all these things. So initially, it's a bringing ourselves into cohesion, pulling all of our realities together. I started talking about that because of the law of inspired action is us getting on that path as we start to recognize, okay, clearly on the higher level, I'm involved in this, and I trust myself, and I trust that the infinity knows everything, and that it could possibly give me the roadmap to things that I didn't even imagine I could have, And when you start to think like that, and you open yourself up to their path, which can only come one way, inspiration. When you lose your keys, and you're searching for them, and you're searching for them, and you're searching for them, you can't fucking find them. And then you go, all right, I give up. I'm sure they'll turn up. And then all of a sudden, you put your hand in your pocket. Oh, and there they are. I got my keys. Or you walk into the room and you sit down on the couch and you glance over to your left and you go, oh, they're on the seat of the couch. I sat here before. The intuition will find the keys. The intuition will get you what you need. But then you must take action. We've told the story about the boat. God sends, doing the short version of the thing. The guy prays to God to save him from a flood. The water's going to kill him. He's going to drown. And God sends him a little boat, a bigger boat, and a helicopter. And he refuses all of them, telling them all that God's going to save him. And then he gets up to heaven and he's like, what the fuck, God? You made me look like an asshole. And God's like, I sent you 2 boats and a helicopter. And the guy's like, oh. Should have taken one of those boats. That's the inspired action. He should take the inspired action. The law of action, but it's really the law of inspired action. You gotta fucking take the inspired action. There's a perpetual exchange of energy, and we are taking action all the time. So I put the perpetual exchange of energy and action. We're talking to people and we're exchanging energy all the time. The best way that this goes about is when, like, the magic of action is taking the inspired action. So remember that. So everybody, all these different vibrations are going around and they're fucking exchanging energy and they're taking inspired action, and there's a cause and effect and different things are happening. They're going different places. Now, the law of rhythm, the law of correspondence, and what we're talking about today, the law of infinite compensation, is the next 3 for us. So the law of rhythm basically just states that, the whole universe that you're in is made up of all these little dances. So first we talked about what's here. What's here, it's the infinite nothing, and there's a mind on top of it that's created a fucking universe. The universe is fundamentally polarized because it's not the oneness, it's, other things. So that it's filled with all of these uniquely vibrating beings, whether they're inanimate and fucking food, vegetable, mineral, whatever, human beings, and etc. And then there's all these relativities to them. And all of them are just made up of the 2 inherent energies of the universe, which make up the gender, the masculine and the feminine, of the various people in their different components because of their horoscopes. And they're going around exchanging energy with each other perpetually. The really wise ones are taking inspired action and getting the places where the universe knows they want it to go. The other ones are just taking action, and there's cause and effect for all these things. And they're getting into these rhythms. These are all rhythms, this thing into cause and effect. There's nothing, and then there's a mind, and it creates a polarity. This 1, 2, 3. That's one of the reasons why 1, 2, 3 is such a major number. That the 1, 2, 3, the 1, 2. There's one thing, and then you add another thing, and adding that other thing fundamentally creates a third thing. When you have this nothing, and then you have this mind, and then I'm sitting here telling you about it, that's a third perspective. That's a being observing the 2 things, going, there's nothing there, and there's a mind there. And what am I? I'm some sort of mind. I'm observing mind. Interesting, right? So there's all this sort of three things always being sort of created, and that's just one of many patterns. I like to talk about it in. I always recommend, a lot of the shows I recommend this. I did, there's like 14 classes. I had charged people for this at the time at Tranquility Within, a spiritual place in Patchogue on Long Island that I was friendly with. And I offered classes during the pandemic. And we had done them online, and I filmed them, and I basically asked everybody when it was over if they didn't mind that if I put it up for free online, so other people could find it one day, because we had filmed it, for the pandemic, so we had it on video, and I was like, just want to put it up somewhere. So anyway, those videos are there. There's like long little like things of you got to wait, just like you skip like 45 minutes into the video, and then it's like an hour and a half or something like that of me talking about all the universal laws, very much like this. Every class I go through all the universal laws and break these things down. I have a lot more specifics and stuff that I had written down, to pass on some of these pieces of information that I thought were the most important for this class. And you can check it out. It's on the Blacklight District Studios YouTube page. So if you go, if you just go to YouTube and type in 13 Universal Laws and Jesse Blaze Snider, you'll find it. Anyway. So there's a ton of rhythms, and one of the ones that I'm just thinking about the video about that I was talking about was you get black and white, right? Black and white. Those are parameters. Then within the parameters, there is gray in the middle. And you could say there's shades of gray. But you could even say that the colors, Roy G. Biv, are like shades within, though, in the black and white of this reality. And then you got Roy G. Biv, coming up from the black, a deeper color or whatever, going up to, a pink or, something sort of bright purple, whatever, getting into the top of your chakras. All your chakras are color coded. In case you don't know, real quick for anybody out there who's ever interested in stones, wherever it is that you may be having your problems, like say it's your legs and hips, butt. That'd probably be your root chakra. Root chakra tend to be black stones and deep red, brown stones. Then you get into orange in your sexual center. Any problems there? You're trying to have baby, trying to get over sexual trauma, something like that. Orange carnelian, orange stones, really good for you. And then in your solar plexus, it goes up to yellow. And this is like, fear. He peed himself because he's scared or whatever. But yellow, real strong yellow is bravery. There's your constitution. There's a whole bunch of gland systems in here or whatever that are, like your liver and everything else that cleans out your body and keeps things going. Then you go up into green in your heart. This is the Roy G. Biv. So green in your heart. Animals tend to eat for their chakras. The balancing color is green. So they all eat green. But sometimes when they get ill, they'll run off and they'll try to find something of a different color depending on what trouble they may be having. Because eating food by color, the color of the food will definitely connect to the chakra system to some degree, and affect those glands and whatever else. And your gland system is very important. The Tibetans talk about, for old age, I do the Tibetan 5 rites, where you do spinning and you do 4 kind of central spine yoga things. But the spinning is about getting your chakra system operating correctly, because apparently it's all spinning as well. And when they get out of alignment with the spin, that causes your collagen to stop firing in the same time as maybe some of your reproductive things, and various other glands in your body aren't working as frequently as they do. It's all slowing down to some degree maybe, but mostly it's not spinning in sync with itself anymore. So by spinning and doing these yoga moves, which if you look up the Tibetan 5 rites, if you're interested in that, you can find, I'm sure, a lot of information. I had read about it like 20 years ago now or something. But I actually believe it's keeping my hair brown and keeping me pretty young. So it's been good for me. So the 5 Tibetan rites. So anyway, the color chakras, if you just go up, then you're into your throat. It's blue, so blue stones for your throat. If you had throat cancer or something like that, somebody's got throat cancer, you want to try to give them a stone to help them on whatever level. And stones are presenting your body with perfect electromagnetic mathematics that it can read. And your body can do things with that information. and essentially can form things, that it doesn't usually form, and form them better. And not more like energetically. It can help you to get your aura, the energetic part of you, flowing the correct way, because of the perfect, energetic flows of these stones, which are being imparted to you in a lot of ways. And there's a lot of things that the stones do that I don't even totally understand. But I can tell you that it definitely plays a role, and it's because of their perfect nature in, just the stone forms, and it forms this crystal, and this crystal, if you get down to it, is just a mathematical structure, and the math is sacred, and our bodies are using the same math to make ourselves. So there's just real keys of sort of like it's like giving a cheat sheet to your body's immune system when you're using stones, and if you use them properly when you need them. So all these colors. Oh, I missed one more. Green, blue is in your throat, and then you've got indigo, violet. It's really kind of purple in your third eye, and pink. It's essentially the next octave from red. The next octave up is pink. It's this higher octave of red, or at least that's as much as we can see it right here in this reality. But it sort of spirals up and becomes a new color wheel, and who knows what those colors look like up there. But that's a rhythm. All of these colors breaking down, and you can see other things break down in various ways. If you go up and you count by a dozen, and that's a rhythm, and if you count by threes, it's a rhythm, and you can count in different patterns, and I think you get it. There's a lot of rhythms, and essentially the law of rhythm points to them, but points to them in the small scale. The law of correspondence essentially points to those same rhythms in the larger scale. It says not only are there these rhythms, but these rhythms will continue, and there will be a corresponding rhythm to follow. If you go through our color chart and you get up to pink, all of a sudden pink will get you up into the next octave of colors, and there's going to be some more colors. You count by a dozen, you can count by a dozen more. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. And I can go up another octave if I want musically. There will be another corresponding rhythm. If there's a vibration for me and a relativity for me, and then there's a vibration for you, there'll be a relativity for you. And if you and I represent relativities to ourselves in this way or that way, there'll be somebody probably who fits right in the middle of us. Or if it makes sense mathematically, or maybe we're the ones that fit right next to each other. And then there's two people who are best friends, just like us, on the opposite side of the personality wheel, that are in corresponding pattern, and we're going up and down through the roller coaster of life in one way, and they're going up and down in a corresponding rhythm. And when we come out of the rhythm that we're on, the next cycle that we're in will be corresponding to the previous rhythmic cycle that we had been on, whether it's a lower vibration or hopefully a higher vibration. Most of the time, things are always cycling up. Why people think, kind of good always wins, which good always does win, but it's also just sort of a perspective of good, yes. But because the bad, it's like, oh, he got me this time, and then you go back and I got him that time. It's like, and now he got you this time. Well, yeah, you won this time until next time, and the energy keeps cycling back, and it's a dance, and that's why there's really no good and no evil. There's just energy that's misunderstanding itself, and interacting with itself in sort of a combative way. But the law of one teaches us, don't do that. Don't do that. You are one. You're one with everything. So there's all these rhythms, and then all of these rhythms have correspondences that will take place as you learn your lesson in one thing, and then you shift over into a new paradigm where you don't do that anymore, and then you learn what you learn from that, and then you come into a new paradigm that you weren't able to get to before because you were doing this other thing that was blocking you from it. Now, the law of infinite compensation is basically the other half of all of this. This mind comes from nothing. It creates everything. Everything's fundamentally polarized in its own unique vibration, but out of balance with itself in one way or another. Ultimately being pulled towards that balance one way or another through, eventually the leaves will decay and turn into other things and whatnot and get to be a relativity or find a balance to itself, because we're all these two gendered mixed up and we're searching for our balance. And we're perpetually exchanging information with each other and energy with each other, and there's a cause and effect. It's creating all of these rhythms. Hopefully we're taking inspired action to get where we want to go. But the law of correspondence is putting us on all of these roads based on where we've been before. And sometimes that can even be where we've been before in other lives. Now, the law of infinite compensation states that essentially everything that can be will be. We talked about the multiverse of okay, we're trying out all the other, if you made a decision like this, you made a decision like that. Everything that we have the capacity to desire, everything that we are interested in, will be explored. If you're interested in it, that means somebody else is too. That means essentially the infinite is interested in it. God is interested in it. And just because you're not interested in it doesn't mean that there isn't somebody in the mind that is. Because everything else is relative to you in some way or another. So all the pieces of the mind, they all have things that they want to see happen. They all have realities that they'd like to live in and universes that they'd like to see come rising up or crashing down in some cases. And to some degree, all of that information is being exercised. Infinite compensation. Things are going to fucking compensate until everything that can be will be. Now, this doesn't mean that it's going to be that for you, but it does mean that it's going to be that in the fucking mind of God, the mind of the infinity being. The infinity thinking being is going to execute all of its thoughts that it had. It's going to try all these things out. It's going to try to experience itself in every possible configuration. And then once it gets to the point where every possible configuration that you can imagine and ones that you can't quite imagine are conceived, it's going to have a perspective that is so unlike your perspective and my perspective right now that it's going to see new possibilities that we can't possibly fathom right now. And it's going to move into a new octave that is so fucking high above this reality that it's neither here nor there to this reality. And that's essentially what consciousness is doing all the time. It's just rising up, and eventually it gets to a point where it was is neither here nor there, and it is just living in a new world. And that is the perpetual exchange of energy. That's where it goes because it's infinitely compensated. Everything that there is to learn will be learned. Everything that there is to experience will be experienced. Whether you think about it as reincarnation through, direct insight from a previous life and having some amount of identity connected to a life. I was, what did I say? A good friend of mine informed me a long time ago that my consciousness was part of the raw consciousness, which was made up of three consciousnesses. My friend and another, our consciousnesses, your consciousness, most of them are actually like multiple places at once on planet Earth at any given time, living out a lot of different experiences. And these consciousnesses are all sort of close enough in vibration to one another that it matters to them. Like we're working on the same karma, similar karma, not the same stuff. Everybody's doing something different, but like we're working on the same batch for the same soul of karma.
So there's many people probably who are holding this energy that that I hold as well as a piece of Ra. Like in fact, I think my friend Digger, I think actually, he's a business partner, one of my best friends, and an idol of mine is a toy maker. You own Art Asylum. He and I think very similarly. We're very very, very similar people, even though we're formed very different. So we've been, we're unique. Very unique to one another. At the same time, I get him very much, and he gets me very much because we formulate and plot similarly in our minds, and that energy is a special energy, and my energy is a special energy. Your energy is a special energy, and there may be some people who share it too, and they may be unique to you, but it's a special energy, and that unique energy formed with this friend and another friend who are representing of those energies, one of the people representing those energies right now, let's say on Earth, we together formed Ra, and I guess we're allowed a lot of access to knowledge, and we're allowed to come down to Egypt and try to remind people of who they are, try to remind the consciousness of its sacredness and its oneness and all of these things, so that we could help raise consciousness. But as so often happens with all of these different things or whatever, it's not really like a great endeavor. The godly beings come down and they don't help. People end up worshiping the people that tried to come and help, instead of like seeing that, like, the power is in you, which is why I'm always trying to tell you, you are one with everything. You are God. You're creating a universe by yourself individually. Even though it may seem like it's affected by all these people, when you go away and you're just in the woods by yourself, I mean, now you're creating some consciousness with the trees in the woods, but you are away from all those consciousnesses that think all those things and make all those universes. And if you knew how powerful you were, you could literally transport yourself to somewhere else, to another universe where things were different. It's good that you can't, because you get to kind of stick around with some of the people that you're in. But I'm told that we're constantly moving ourselves through the multiverse based on what we're thinking at any given moment, and the channel is changing, and we can't see it changing because basically all of a sudden just a new channel in the people that are around us just comes on. They're wearing the same thing. It's just a slightly different vector that we're going to get them from based on where we're coming from. Today's episode, I've given you some amazing information. I hope people are out there and appreciate. I hope there's a few people out there going, my mind is blowing, Jesse, because this stuff was mind blowing to me as I learned it. So I'm not saying that from Jesse's so cool. I'm saying it from I'm so glad to be talking about these things because I found this shit fascinating. So yeah, everything's fucking compensating like gangbusters, and everything that can be will be. I'm going to go through my notes here. I didn't write a ton of notes, and that's half the reason why I decided to go through these things. Because do you see, after talking about that, why it's so important to talk about all those universal laws and then talk about the law of infinite compensation? It's so important to know that we're a mind, and that the mind's already thought of all the possibilities. Law of infinite compensation says we're going to get them. And ultimately, the possibilities are all these different, they're all polarities, because there's only one balanced, nothing, infinite sleeping God. So everything is out of balance polarity of the thing, with a unique vibration, searching for a balancing relativity. Everything's just sort of seesawing through reality. And everything will seesaw its way out into new configurations forever. Some of the notes that I wrote for today's episode. Infinite compensation. Anything is possible. Yes. Anything that you can think, the infinite mind can think. It's that simple. If you can think it, it can be thought. There are higher levels of dimensional realms in consciousness that I understand to be literally realms where pigs can fly. Everything that is literally impossible becomes possible. In bizarre ways that we can't even begin to understand, because I'm not even sure what that means when I'm fucking saying it out loud. But at the same time, I do know what it means in principle. And it means everything that our mind doesn't think is possible. Well, this is the fold that brain upside down universe. And oh my God, what the fuck does that place look like? Who knows? But what is it? That's just the continuation of the thing that we've been talking about. Infinite compensation. God, or the infinite mind, it's thought of all the things, and it's going to execute all of the plans of all the things. And it just goes on because the mind keeps going. The mind can keep thinking. So anything is possible. The law of infinite compensation will eventually balance everything. Everything's seesawing. Things spread out into a million pieces and explore itself in all directions, and then eventually as consciousness becomes higher and higher, it realizes its oneness. It realizes that essentially there's only one experience, which is this universal, very, very, very fucking complex, infinitely complex experience that we're all having, where you are Ra and I am, whoever you might be thinking, you have some sort of connection to, Cleopatra or Jesus Christ or whoever it might be. I'm not trying to aggrandize myself. That was the other thing I wanted to say about the thing, how much stock you put into the other lives. There may be things to learn from the other lives. I don't put much stock into, the Ra thing. It's like silly. But do I think it's true? I've asked enough fucking psychics that I've kind of become convinced that it's true. And I guess a lot of my usefulness as a mind on planet Earth is coming from this place of my thinking very differently than other people, and maybe being naturally predisposed to information that is harder for other people to wrap their head around. But for me, it was rather natural. I feel very comfortable in that place. I didn't have to be told by a psychic that I had worked with plant medicine a lot in other past lives, because I know that I'm very comfortable working with ayahuasca. I'm very comfortable working with mushrooms. And as I see some friends kind of dread going to sit with ayahuasca, and I'm sort of just like, yay! Even though it's very hard work that you end up doing, but actually on the substance and actually working with the plants, I feel so at home. And really, it's always just such a blessing, and I miss it when I've gone a while without communing in that way, because it really is just sort of a next level bit of consciousness that I get to take on, that reaffirms everything that I know that I'm trying to remind as many people as I can of, because it's the information that we need to save ourselves from suffering. And I don't want any of you guys out there suffering any more than you need to. So please, whenever you're hearing my voice or hearing me say anything, I have a sense of humor, and I'm a very strong personality, but I am a humble man, and I bring this information to you very humbly, with great love and Care Bear stare to you all. I hope this does you a world of good from the very bottom of my heart. Anyway, sorry, got myself all choked up, because I mean it. Everything is being compensated for. Yeah, that's a fucking insightful note, Jesse. I think I've gone over that with you, right? Everything's being compensated for. Universe is destined to explore itself completely. Yeah, we covered that. The thing about all successful people, they never gave up. I love that. I don't know if this was fully sort of explored I've been watching my universal law classes on YouTube before I do these podcasts, specifically on these laws, just because I want to brush up on it, just like I'll be brushing up on various conspiracy topics or whatever else before I come into those shows, once I get into sort of the normal show. Even though to some degree I'm going to try to make I wanted to start with universal law, because this is what they teach the fucking Freemasons. This is what they teach the friggin' Illuminati. I mean, granted, they're teaching a dark black magic version of this shit. And I mean, eventually I will teach you about some of those concepts as well, not so that you can go out and do black magic, but so that you can understand all of the ways in which it is possible for people to manipulate you. because you are one with everyone, and you are living in a giant mind. There's a lot of ways to fuck with that mind, and fuck with the oneness from afar. And things are happening all the time. And this is why good people and wise people need to be woken up and made aware of the fundamentals of the universe they're living in, so that they can, become the brilliant people that they already are. They've just been given a very false idea of what their reality is. So this is what we're trying to fix here. So to talk about that a little deeper, all successful people, they never gave up. Conceptually, we're talking about the law of infinite compensation. And if you're talking about never giving up, infinitely compensating, what's the commonality between all successful people? They never gave up. Neither does the universe. The universe will get everything done. It will get to everything. Everything will be infinitely compensated for. You can do it too. Just never give up. Talking about infinite small and whole numbers. Oh, cool. All right, so this is a decent conversation here. Okay, so this is a conversation that we're going to end on. Okay, infinite small and whole numbers. So I think I've talked about infinite small on the show before, if you've listened to this, but I'll briefly talk about it. Let's say I've got a pen in front of me. I cut it in half. Okay, now I take that half and I cut it in half. Okay, now I take that quarter and I cut it in half. Now I take that eighth and I cut it in half, and I take that 16th and I cut it in half, and I take that 32 and I cut it in half, 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 and I cut it in half. Now, eventually, I may get down to 2 molecules worth of thing to cut in half. And then I cut it in half and I got 1 molecule of thing. But then conceptually, I can cut that molecule in half. And then I can cut that half of a molecule in half. And then conceptually, I can keep doing this for forever. The half never goes away. There'll always be something in, my hand. There'll be something there. Or conceptually, at least, there always is. And the biggest thing, like that, before I get into whole numbers, but you go like space, the space between you and I. Okay, just think about that, right? Because there's no molecules. So I cut the space between you and I. Cut it in half, I cut it in half, I cut it in half, I cut it in half. I can cut that in half for infinity. What's that called? Dimensions, octaves. Because now there's a zeroing in perspective where this can continue to shrink down, and that's sort of the way in which reality spirals up and down, and it ends up being stacked on top of each other. But the metaphor is apt. So if you can see that, this is an infinite thing. Just think of it again conceptually, right? Because if you can really wrap your head around this concept, this is the stuff that proves the reality as a mind, okay? If you're out there and you consider yourself really smart, and, you're trying to take all this stuff with a grain of salt, whatever, really think about this, okay? I've got a 1. I've got a 2. I cut the 1 in half, and I got 0.5. I cut the 0.5 in half. I got 2.5. And I can represent this forever. I can cut it again and cut it again and cut. Once I have a number, I just have an imaginary idea of a number, and I'm trying to get rid of it. I'm trying to cut it down to nothing, and I can never cut it down to nothing. And what remains will always essentially be some percentage of the 1. Intellectually, this is how you can't quit consciousness, man. You can't beat consciousness. the one, the two. All these ideas are sort of separate and infinite and whole. Everything is infinitely there, and you can't cut and get, like, if you can't get rid of anything, like what does this mean? Everything's sort of eternal and infinite and holy and spiritual, and you're living in this thought of a thing. Okay? Even the physical things, even getting down into the concept of the molecule, whatever. I know these, well, there's a physical whatever. But the fact that intellectually we can think in these ways, there's so many different ways in which you can apply these sort of principles of breaking this stuff down, shrinking it down, or expanding it. And it just goes on forever. The thought goes on for forever. Things could theoretically be bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Everything can just keep going bigger, and everything can keep going smaller. And I really, for me, this was some of the building blocks of my understanding of the infinite consciousness that is sort of like this ball inside a ball inside a ball. It's just many. Yeah, I think of it sometimes as like that plastic. It's not plastic. It's like rubber. They put water in it, and it's like a little it's got a hole in the middle, and it'll slide amongst its own hole. Like, there'll be a hole in the center of it, and the water will slide among the tube of rubber, where it's like folding inside of itself. And that's so much of like the layers of consciousness and producing a sort of an onion plethora worth of reality, as well as I come to understand it, because we're all stacked on top of each other, creating our reality, imagining that we're spread out in different superpositions based on a lot of different factors. So that right there, if you can, and perhaps I'm not even doing the best job at expressing the majesty and the magic that is on display in this sort of inability to get rid of anything by cutting it in half. And I know it seems like sort of silly, but hidden there is like the secret of, oh, dude, it's all magic. It's all a dream. Everything's made up. It's all a thought. And you can't I'm not finding the right words to kind of blow your mind here, but hopefully I've got you on the edge of your seat trying to sort of figure out what this means if you can't kind of grasp what I'm pointing to. And I'm hearing you out there in the audience going, yeah, but there's only so many particles, and eventually it'd be an odd number, it'd be an even number, depending on where you cut the thing in half. And but don't get focused so much on the physical. The mental game demonstrates some major things about the physical. I'm having trouble pulling out how to express what it shows. My dogs are being pretty good boys. I'm Digger's dogs, but our dogs, I've come to love them too. So anyway, let's wrap this fucking thing up with infinite compensation. Why it's always right to be authentic, holding things in, and the silver balls. We talked about the silver balls, and a lot of businessmen have them on their desk, and they're hanging there, and you pull the one ball, and it slides, and it goes bang, and it hits one ball, and it bounces into all the other balls, and then the ball pops up on the other side, and then it comes down, and it goes bang, and it hits them across the thing, and it goes bang, and it does this little back and forth thing until all the momentum that's been put into it dissipates. Well, when you get upset about something, let's say, and you don't say, oh, this upset me, to the person or something like that at the time as it happens, let's say, somebody disrespects you, and you're like, oh, I'm upset about that. And now a few weeks go by, and now you see them again, and you don't say anything. And now like another few weeks go by, and this guy does something kind of again that really kind of bothers you, and now you finally say something, and you go, you did this to me before. And now this person thinks, this person's been upset with me for months. Whoa. All that momentum you had of being upset with them for months because you didn't express yourself, now it transfers over to them. Now they have the relativity from that experience for you, and the rhythm continues over there with them. Now they're holding on to this shit. They're fucking pissed off. Who knows what might happen? Maybe they got something that they, were a little upset about that they'd been holding back. And this is recipe for disaster. If something happens and you go, hey, I didn't appreciate that, in the moment, it's done. That person knows I need to respect this person on that level. If I want to be friends with them, this is the price I got to pay. Okay, cool. We meet halfway. Done. But if something happens and you hold it in, that energy will be compensated. Eventually, that shit will work itself out. When you hold things back, eventually it comes out. Eventually, your upset energy, your emotions, they will come out. The people will find out the things. So it just behooves you to not hold anything in. I got to yell at my dog. If I got to yell at him, I'm going to be upset. Bobby is very annoying. No, sorry. Bobby's the best. Momo is very annoying. Momo's a girl, and she's just always fucking barking and shit. Drive me a little crazy. I love them, but Momo, I'm going to bite you in the ear. Okay. So it's just a really good practice to speak your mind. Especially when you're feeling hurt feelings kind of thing, or something's upset you or whatever, stand up for it right then. It becomes bigger over time because of this law of compensation. Because, if you have that thought, this upsets me, and it doesn't get explored, it's this repressed thing, and it'll get explored in some other way. Maybe it won't even get explored with that person. It'll get explored later with your mother-in-law or somebody else, who you don't want to make a bad impression with, but now you do because you had to get it out because that law of infinite compensation came up and they did something similar to you, and now, you bite their head off. So the law of infinite compensation says that everything's going to happen. And if you believe anything that you can believe, just get at it. The law of infinite compensation says if you keep fucking working at something, eventually it will happen. You don't even need to fucking practice the law of inspired action. Eventually, it's just going to happen by accident because of the law of infinite compensation. If you keep fucking working at it. Granted, if you keep working at it and you recognize that all is one, you're one with everybody, and that you don't want to do bad things to other people because you're just doing bad things to yourself. And on the other side of things, you're going to want to rectify that situation because you don't want to do that. And the law of mind, everything's just a mind. So anything that you can think is what God has thought, is what the infinite universe has thought. You can think the things too. You can create things. You can pull things from that. You're one with that. And understanding the rhythms of the universe and all the correspondences and whatnot that you're going to see, because you know that I'm going through this right now. So I'm in this high turn, there'll probably be a low turn. I'm in this low turn, there'll probably be a high turn. Eventually, I've been in a low turn. I know my low turn is over. It's already started to turn, and I knew that the longer it lasted, the more I knew this high turn was going to fucking come gangbusters. I've had a great life, and my low turn is fucking impressive for people who have had low turns. But it was very difficult for me, and in a lot of different ways. That if I explain to you why this was hard and this is hard, because me in particular, I don't really like this, I'm not very comfortable like this. Everybody is living in a reality that's been sculpted for them, and mine has been sculpted for me. But I have known, and I have focused on that idea many times of what goes up must come down, and what goes down must come up. So if you're out there and you need to fucking hear, get out there, do something. You're God. You could do anything. And if you don't give up, the law of infinite compensation says you will eventually succeed. I'm Jesse Blaze Snider. Next week, I'm going to be talking about the law of attraction, but I like to think of it as the law of attracting creation, because it's creation. You're God. You got to friggin' do all this stuff. But that's going to wrap up the universal laws next week, and then I'm going to kind of get into a week-by-week thing. I'll be kind of probably picking and choosing what I'll be doing based on what suits my fancy or what's going on in the news that seems worth talking about. I've interrupted a couple of these laws in order to talk about weather control, and talk about Trump and so much of what they've done with him and the hysteria that they've caused amongst the American people over a lot of silliness. Well, not for them. They definitely don't want Trump. But if you want to check out those episodes, you can go back and find them. The Law of Attraction will be pretty great next week. We talk about The Secret and all this other bullshit. If you're a geek like me, I do a show every Wednesday and every Saturday. I'm about to record my Saturday show called Coolest Geek Alive. Saturdays I do picks for movies and TV shows that I think are fucking awesome that you should check out. And then Wednesdays I usually just talk about the industry, whether it's film industry, comics, and whatever else that are, what they're doing with the stuff that they have and how they're treating the material, really from a perspective of a writer. I've written all manner of things all my life and really consider that my specialty, writing. And I love doing that show. And then I love music too, and every Monday I do a show called All Your Favorite Bands Suck. I'm about to record, I think, my 50th show. And I just love music. And I love talking about it. Love talking about all the stuff that I love, sharing all my favorite stuff. Not really talking about the depth of music. My show's not really about minutia. It's just me gushing over some of my favorite songs and favorite albums and favorite bands. But there's 50 of them up so far. 50 different bands to get into. If you're a music fan and you've been looking for some new bands to get into, well, maybe you haven't heard some of the bands that I mentioned. There's 50 of them, so there's probably one or two. Anyway, I love you guys. I hope you're enjoying the show, and I hope you will join me again next Friday, even though I know it's Saturday today, for another fucking awesome episode of Everything They Don't Want You to Know. Love you guys. Bye.